news. This is the week in which the Funeral Planning Committee sought to identify where would be the most appropriate place to bury President Mills. It's the week in which the public was engaged with a fierce debate about where the most appropriate place would be. Finally, a resolution has been reached, or has it not? The family of President Mills initially raised a few questions, but now seems to have reached a consensus with the Funeral Planning Committee. We will go through the processes that have been going on throughout the week, and you tell us, while my guests give their own analysis, what you make of how we have handled this process so far. It's also the week in which Kwesi Amissah-Arthur was named as the vice presidential nominee. He is set to face the Parliamentary Appointments Committee on Monday morning at 9 a.m. His naming raised a few questions from within the NDC, but questions that seem to have been answered. We would analyze his person, his work, would analyze his political fortunes, if indeed he goes ahead to be confirmed as vice presidential candidate for the NDC, something we're told would be pretty likely. It's also the week in which Martin Amidu reminded all of us that there are still some judgment debt worries that need to be dealt with. He's gone to the Supreme Court and he's filed an application asking for 9 declarations about isophoton. My guest this morning, the Honorable Kojo Edwasare, Member of Parliament for Adenta, Susan Edwa-Mankwa, Vice Chairperson of the CPP, Nana Kumia, Director of Communications in the NPP, and Abdul Malik Wekubako Jr., Managing News Editor of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. We will start off with 2 key events this week. First, the attempt to decide where will be the most befitting place to bury President Mills. I'm sure you followed the public conversation, some of the objections raised. Now we're told finally he'll be buried between the Castle Drive and the Marine Drive. There were even questions about whether or not there was going to be a double burial after members of his family had suggested that after the state burial, they would then have room to, as it were, know what to do next. And talking of the family, I'm sure you also followed a bit of a brouhaha, first between 2 sides of the family, and then at a point between one side of the family and government. The big question, what do you make of how we have handled deciding where to bury the old man and how to include his family in all of this? Nana, let me start with you.
Thank you, Kojo. Let me say good morning to your listeners and to my co-panelist. The matter of the organizing the funeral and the burial of President Mills is a matter that has engaged the attention of all of us Ghanaians. And there has been some serious mishaps on the part of the government regarding the burial arrangements, the funeral arrangements. The committee that was set up to plan these things initially was a partisan committee. This is a national affair. The president of the country has passed on. The organization of the funeral and the burial is a national matter. So when from the get-go, they had a partisan committee consisting of just government and NDC party people, it gave a lot of concern. And so initially you heard about the confusion from stakeholders, especially the family of the late president, complaining loudly about how they have not been consulted and how they did not agree to some of the arrangements that were being announced. Fortunately, the last 2 or 3 days, that seems to have been corrected in terms of the membership of the committee. And now you have political party representatives. And I understand that the family too is represented in the committee that is planning the burial and the funeral. So if we had done that earlier, all the feuds, especially from the family, would have been avoided. You also had some confusion about the various arrangements. I think it was just last week on this very program that we had an announcement from a minister of state that the President Mahama had decided that the Jubilee House or Flagstaff House was going to be the burial grounds for the late president. And then the very next day, which was a Sunday, you had conflicting announcements. The very minister who made the announcement on this, your program, also came out with something that was contradictory to what he himself had announced. And then you had other members of the committee also coming out with contradictory announcements about the burial. And then you heard that it was going to be done somewhere else. I think it was said we're going to do something at the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum. You heard that announcement, and then you heard that no, the whole thing was still being considered. And then we saw that there was extensive digging going on at particularly the Jubilee House, and which also gave rise to more confusion. Some Chinese workers doing one or two holes that look like graves also gave rise to further confusion. Then we heard that it probably will be buried in his hometown, Utuam, in the central region. So all sorts of conflicts. And eventually we've been told that a place has been found along the Castle Drive, between the castle and the Marine Drive. That is where he'll be buried. And that place will be developed further into some kind of mausoleum for presidents and other heroes, so designated. But before this, there had been so much confusion about what is going to be done or what is intended. Now the point is, if you are not ready with a concrete decision, why make announcements? You know, if you haven't finished your consultations, if you yourself in your own minds, you haven't arrived at a definite place, why all of these announcements and counter announcements and protests and confusion? It wasn't tidy at all. It wasn't tidy. And I can only hope that going forward, now that the membership of the committee, the funeral planning committee, has been broadened to include more stakeholders, things will be a bit more straightforward now. Kojo.
I listened to President John Dramani Mahama speak yesterday, in which, or during which speech, he suggested that, there's been a lot of radio talk about this, and it's not going to be radio talk that would determine who takes what decision. And there are people who have suggested that the real problem here isn't that the funeral planning committee hasn't been up to its task or something like that, but it's been because people have been too excited, giving opinions and posturing on radio. And that's why it seems as though things are being tardily handled, but that the funeral planning committee has just been going about its consultations and doing its work.
The people who had been speaking are supposed to be members of the funeral planning committee. I mean, the minister who spoke here last week on the matter, he quoted the president directly. That's what he told us, that the president has decided that this was going to be the burial grounds. The next day, the people who spoke were also members of the funeral planning committee. So these are not just a radio chatter. These were statements coming from people who are supposed to have knowledge about what is going to happen. So it's not just people just sitting on radio and speculating. But if people sat on radio and mass media and speculated, they were just throwing forward their ideas, which they are allowed to. But pronouncements have come from members of the committee. And that really was serious. And it has to be corrected. And if they've corrected it now, the blame should not be put on people who are speculating on radio. The vice president himself, I understand he used some very harsh words and so on. And that surprised many people. You remember the 1 week celebration at the Children's Park, I think this week Tuesday, the vice president's conduct at that funeral 1 week celebration. Sorry, the president's conduct at that funeral celebration has given rise to lots of concern that this was a national occasion. The whole nation had come together. There were members, supporters, and leaders of other political parties and social groups there at the Children's Park. That wasn't an occasion for partisan politicking. That is what the vice president chose to do. Promoting himself, promoting his candidacy on that solemn occasion, the 1 week celebration, was very untidy, very insensitive, talking about it being divine will or some divine provision that he be the leader at this time. Extremely insensitive. comments to be making on that particular occasion, where the family members were there, the fallen president had not been buried, and you were saying that it was divine providence that you be the leader at this time, the insinuation is terrible and very insensitive for family members. And going on to talk about he being the first leader, the first president to be born in Ghana, a statement that was difficult to find what meaning there was to it. I mean, being born after 1957 did not confer any special leadership talent on anybody. And I don't know why the vice president chose to make that as a big promotion issue for him. And it's quite insulting to all the leaders who have come, who were born before independence, including President Mills himself. In any case, when he had a chance to choose his vice presidential nominee, he chose somebody who was born before 1957. So what is the point of all of this business about being born in 1957 and so on? So there have been difficulties, and for him to use that particular occasion to promote himself and his candidature was extremely insensitive and unwise.
Nana Kumia is the communications director of the New Patriotic Party. I just want to play back, for the benefit of our viewers and our listeners, a press statement or some comments made to the press by Mr. Awotwe Pratt, who represents President Mills's family in these funeral planning engagements. And then I'll play back to you the chairman of the funeral planning committee's comments, Mr. Kofi Totobi-Kwache, when he addressed the press yesterday. And then I'll go to Susan for her thoughts as well.
Is a man for the whole nation, and the presidency is the seat of government, who is in charge of every activities in Ghana. So we've given that prerogative to the president to determine the place for the barrier as at now. But we are in consultation with them. We've agreed that we have the last a place for the barrier of the president, the final barrier place of the president.
It will be an open-air congregational all-night service interspersed with cultural performances and the like. On that Thursday, we expect the banquet hall or the area where the president has been laid in state to be closed to the public by 12 midnight. On Friday, August 10th, the family will convene at the banquet hall to perform the traditional farewell ceremonies before the casket is closed. We expect that the casket will be conveyed by the military detachment to the Black Star Square, where the funeral, or is it funeral? Where the funeral church service will be held. We expect a number of visiting heads of state on that day, and provision has been made for them to file past when they arrive at the Black Star Square. After that, but apart from that, there will be no filing pass apart from the visiting heads of state and the head of state of the Republic of Ghana, who will pay his last respect on behalf of the nation before the casket is finally closed. The president will at that point light the eternal flame, resume his seat, and the service, there will be a call to worship. The service will be officiated by the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church, Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante. But the church program has been so drawn up that there will be total involvement of a number of clergy, as well as the national chief imam. We expect the church service to last for a period of an hour and a half. I can hear somebody say, we will try. If even if we exceed it, it will just be by a couple of minutes. This program is going to be marshaled by the military, and you know how the military do their things.
So that's Kofi Totobi-Kwache, who is chairman of the Funeral Planning Committee, outlining some of the arrangements when he met the press with other members of the committee yesterday at the Accra International Conference Center. Suzanne, let me ask of you whether or not you share this view that Nana professed, that some of these comments, particularly by President Mahama on the one-week anniversary, were insensitive, and the manner in which we've handled some of these surrounding events have just been untidy. We could have done better at it.
Yes, I agree. I think that we are too want to rush to the press with things. And this has characterized governance for the last few years. Things haven't been firmed up, and then somebody rushes to the press and says all sorts of things, and then they come and then they retract. It's like we're doing governance by radio or by TV, and it has been a characteristic of this NDC, with a lot of these rushing to give edicts, and then when they sit down and think about it, then they come back. It's all is untidy, and this has been the case, with this burial issue. I don't know, with government, we should be able to call experts with a phone call and say, the man is a fanti, what are the traditional things to do? I think you have elders in your council of, Council of State, where you have chiefs traditionally. What are the things to do? Get the family, this. Can we talk? Can we do this? Can we negotiate? Or who is it? Before we come out public with all these things, the family is talking, somebody else is talking. It doesn't sound as if we are organized at all, And I think that it's a sad commentary on all the things that happen in this country. We do all these funny things, and this is just one thing that is showing us up again. I mean, a phone call. Our president has died. He belongs to this ethnic group. What do they do? Who in the family are we supposed to speak to that will not create issues? Because we all know that when people die, these issues that, are going on right now are things that happen almost all the time between families and the children, etc., etc. We should have avoided it with our president and say, we don't want those things that happen normally to happen with this, and so we should deal with it properly. And so I think that, yes, it's been pretty untied, but we hope that this week flows smoothly. Everything that has been said will be done and done properly. I guess that the issue about the the president, he started campaigning when everybody else had toned down. The mood of the country was that, okay, we've lost a father, we want to hold back. We will do the campaigning. There is time to do that campaigning. But at this moment, our focus will be on our late president, So it sort of threw people and said, wow, okay. Hey, we are toning down, we are holding back, and then you are, using this to campaign. And I think that a lot of us didn't find it exactly tasteful, So there's a mixed bag. I guess maybe it was involuntary comments. And so that, okay, this is whatever, but I think that should have taken the mood of the country into consideration, where a lot of people are, a lot more calmer on the airwaves in terms of criticizing the Mills administration, and then should have just said things about, how we've lost, a president, etc., etc. But instead of doing the campaigning that went on.
And you were not very pleased with that. But just to stay on that, interpretation that what he said amounted to, campaigning when everybody else had toned down. Let me ask you to put on your political cap as well. This is a person who was vice president, who's now been thrust onto the seat as president. He's got just about 5 months to an election. He has to wait until perhaps 1st September to be hopefully confirmed by his party. It is not unknown to anybody that the way he postures himself and what he says in these moments may inure to his benefit if he's able to do it pretty well. I'm sure if you were one of his advisors, you wouldn't be too critical of his comments and his posturing.
Well, I mean, the temptation is there, definitely. But sometimes there are a lot of things that silence also says. People would have said, wow, look at this. He didn't do any campaigning. He had the opportunity to do so, but he showed strength in not campaigning and focusing on what was at hand. So there's so many ways of campaigning. You can campaign by saying things, and you can campaign in a sort of way just by your actions or by your silence. In certain things. And I think that maybe you should have taken the silent option. And it would have been campaigning anyway, would have looked that, as for me, I am focusing on the moment, on the matter at hand, and then not looking. Yes, but you see, our president is not new to our politics. I mean, I can bet you there's no child in any village who, if you said something, would not pep up and say, I think I know the name, or I know this face. They may not know the name, but they may know the face, because in the last few years, unlike other vice presidents, who have actually been a little faceless, he's been more upfront and been doing a lot of things. So, and he's a very pleasant person to look at, So people look at people who are nice looking. So he didn't need to do that. He could have gone the silent option and focused on the 1 week. What is 1 week for? 1 week is to say that we want to set a date, we want to do this. That's traditionally what it is for. And so we could have focused on that.
Mr. Dwasari, has the president been subtly campaigning with some of these comments he's made? And could we have handled the arrangements that have been made so far in some of the conversations, whether with family or with the general public, in a better manner? After all, in spite of our loss, this is still governance.
Okay, thanks, Kojo. But before I respond to that question, I would like to start with some of the issues my senior colleague raised about the funeral, right? You can choose to call it any name, but we all know. First and foremost, I want to greet your viewers and your listeners, Joy. I don't know what I've listened to Nana Akumia a couple of times on this particular matter, and it looks as if the attempt is being made to make it appear as if the NDC does not know what to do, or we are lost or short of ideas as to how to plan a funeral. That is the sense I'm beginning to have with the direction of Nana Akumia and his team of communicators. But let us also look at how usually when a family that is bereaved go about their funeral arrangements and all of that. Lately, we all know about this 1 week celebration thing, which is beginning to seep into our tradition somehow. It's been embraced all over the place. So yes, first and foremost, we all know the circumstances under which the president left us, unceremonious, and the attendant challenges we had to face in terms of replacing, or let me say, swearing in the vice president then as the substantive president. And certainly, this is a position that will take someone some time, or let me say the person who occupies that position some time to fit into. And what a way to become president. So, you know, sudden and, you know.
The man said so about divine providence.
If it's divine providence, it still doesn't take away the suddenness of the whole thing, how it happened. Okay, I'm not sure that morning when he woke up, he knew he was going to become president by 8:30 that evening. So certainly, it would take a while for him to even accept or come to terms with what had happened. And all of us who were not even so close and all of that. So I'm surprised when people want to make things look like there should be that automatic response to the way things should go. First and foremost, once a new king takes a seat, it affects a lot of things, planning and all of that, because the president, if he was alive, the late president, if he was alive, had his team he was going to work with. And for a new president, it would take a while for them to know, or for him to know, or who to hand a particular issue to and all of that. So let's try to situate the issue in that context. Then we can understand that certainly challenges like these will be normal and nothing extraordinary. Certainly, if the sitting president was the one managing such a thing, it would be a lot easier. But with a new president, certainly we'll have this kind of challenges. So the NPP should relax. And so soon, they've also become very like a headmaster or headmistress, you know, trying to dictate how things should be done. It should be done. If you listen to their the comments of the NPP communicators, they seem to want to, from afar, dictate how or what is the best practice and all of that. But we want to let everybody know that we are capable as a government. We have the people who can manage issues such as what we have. So let's put this issue in perspective. The first 1 week, or let's say the 1 week celebration, it went perfect. It was all over the country. We've seen reports on radio, on TV, and heard reports from radio reporters all over the country. The way it was done, and I am surprised that of all that took place on that day, it is that line that the vice president...
He's president now, you know.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
And I notice many people are honestly, trying to get used to
seriously,
it.
Seriously, I am one of such people, I'm sorry. The president was, that line that he chipped into his speech seemed to unsettle some people, especially our friends from the NPP. But there's this adage that when you talk about bones, you know, usually it is the elderly who usually complain whenever the issue about bones come up. You see, so what is the challenge here? The president says that I was born in Ghana. I was the only president that was born in Ghana. Certainly, it's just been witty. Okay, the fact that he was born when Ghana became independent. And I think Ghanaians should have some sense of humor, at least to not to take every issue so seriously. Of course, he knew people were there, they were mourning and all of that, but at least he's there to also comfort, because he's like the, in Tree, you say the Yipaso Hene, you know, the one on whom this whole funeral is
chief mourner.
Yeah, the chief mourner, let me say. You see, so he's comforting people. At least he should be able to let people, of course, as much as people, our president, we've lost our president, we are mourning. Sometimes you have to be a little say things that will settle people, comfort people, and all of that. So I'm not sure the idea was to come and use that platform to campaign, or of course he had to announce his presence. This was like, apart from the speech he gave at the in Parliament after the inauguration, that was a rather solemn moment for anybody. You could feel his voice break and all of that. But over a period, like a week and all of that, certainly the system will shift a little bit, even though we're still in a mourning mood, people clad in black and red, those who were wailing will wail, but as the main man, of course, he had to say something to also show that, yes, he has arrived, he is the president, and I don't really see the part that makes my senior colleague and his people so jittery, and since then, like, they are finding all sorts of a reason to make the whole thing appear so bad. But I don't think it was intended. He intended to come and say anything to spite anybody or whatever it is.
I also asked you about what you make of how we have handled what has appeared as a public engagement on deciding where to bury him. Was the Flagstaff House or the Jubilee House seriously under consideration?
Of course, I think so, because in some of the meetings we held, there were 4 places that was under consideration. Flagstaff House was one, the Castle Drive was one, the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum was one, and also the military also said he had a reserved place for, since he's a commander-in-chief, of course, they have some specially reserved place for such personalities. So they could put up some edifice there and bury him there. So these were all under consideration. Nana, again, is trying to make things appear like Honorable Haruna Idrisu came and made an emphatic statement and all of that. Of course, as I said, it was one of the places being considered, but we at that time, you realize that the government had to, or let me say, yes, the government had to decide something or like have some options before they met with the family. People are asking why right from the onset they didn't engage the government, the family, to deliberate on some of these issues. There must always be something that everybody must come to the table with. So the government should have its own plan, so that when they go and meet with the family, or when they meet as a group, this time with the family involved, this will be the proposal from government. And then the family will also have their, input. Because certainly whoever will be part of the family would also have met with the family itself, or the representative would have met with the family and will carry whatever the family has already decided, or let's say deliberated upon, or their proposals to bring to bear.
Susan's argument is that while all of that conversation goes on behind the scenes, it's untidy to have persons then doing open communication, some suggesting a decision is being made, some trying to justify one of the venues or one of the locations. It makes the bigger picture untidy. And at a solemn moment like that, when when the eyes of the world are on us, and when we are seeking to do this in dignity, we shouldn't be handling things that way.
I agree. I agree, because what Honorable Haruna put out there seemed to have suggested at the time that was a decision, that the decision had been made that was a place he was going to be buried. But it was at the time they hadn't even met with the family, or the family had not even joined the government's team to even deliberate on it as whether that place is okay or not for them and all of that. So certainly it was a bit premature to put out that information. But be that as it may, he came back the very next day, to revise this information. So why are we keeping to the whatever supposed mistake or whatever it is and castigating him for that? Why are we not moving forward when he has come out to say that these are the other considerations? But of course, I came out a bit early with this particular one. So for me, this last 1 week, monitoring radio, I think I've been disappointed, I must be honest with you, with our media, because it appears we seem to be enjoying our failures, talking so much about our failures rather than things that will move this country forward. For me, I yesterday, for instance, I had to shut my radio because I realized most of that you turn on this radio, it's the same issue. And the only thing we needed to do was wait for the official information from government. That is all we needed to do. Just that, unfortunately, people were, preempting and all of that. Government, we were made to keep quiet on this matter. And as much as possible, everybody complied. So the meetings will be over, and then the press conference that had been slated for later yesterday would have come out, and then the official information will be put out there. Unfortunately, the media took a particular dimension of the whole thing, making it look as if we are so incompetent, we can't even plan a funeral, and it's sometimes a bit...
So it was the media that made it look bad?
For me, I think so.
Okay.
I think so, because yes, our colleagues will want to cash in on such information. When I say our colleagues, I'm talking about the MPP, they will cash in on such information. And I heard, he's an Akan, and he has to, they were suggesting all manner of things on radio and on TV, as if, there's no Akan in NDC. And for me, I think we've learned from this, and we should move on. Before
I go to Kwekubak, let me ask of you, because you're a member of parliament and a member of the NDC, President Mills will be buried on Friday. Are we, and I've heard people ask, are we going to get a coroner's report, or at least a report from, the final doctors who attended to him, to tell the nation about the cause of death before that burial? Or it's something that is going to be treated as, oh, it's something we don't talk about, we're mourning, so let's not ask those questions?
Well, could you, this question has come up a couple of times, and I want to ask this question before I attempt to answer that question. That what will it do? What will be the benefit for me, Eduasare, when the president's what we call a pathology report is published? He had whatever X, Y, W, Q.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Yes.
I'm asking for a cause of death or a coroner's report. I'm sure you do know that when, and I use this expression with due respect, when ordinary people even die, you would have a cause of death, or if he died, outside the hospital, they issue a coroner's report. So for our president, I'm not sure you're suggesting
I am coming to that point, because it started from here. We want to know what killed him. That's what it is. And then in between, what happened? What were the, what will I say, antecedents before he died? What were the things that happened? I've heard people interpret, oh, there was no ambulance, there was an ambulance, there was no key, there was no dispatch rider, all manner of things. Of course, these are legitimate questions that we believe should unravel as time goes on, but not before. Personally, I don't think it should happen before the burial. When the burial is done and over with, I think some of these questions are legitimate questions, and it will be good to know, probably not the pathology report, but probably someone should answer some of these questions. Was there an ambulance? How did he get there? Where was he? Because we've heard all manner of things, and some you don't even know which part to hold. So it will be better to synergize this, whatever pockets of information that we've had regarding how this whole thing happened. It's not a bad idea, but it should happen after the burial, because it could make the whole system murkier, for the burial, and I think it should be done after.
Time is just 10 a.m. This is Newsfile. On radio, we're on Joy FM and our affiliates across the country. On TV, we're on the Joy News channel on Multi-TV. And online, we're on myjoyonline.com. Kweku Bako Jr. Is a managing editor of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. It's been argued by Mr. Edwasari that what is being described as untidy was the media's creation.
Well, that is to be expected from a politician, a member of the ruling party. I'm not sure if you're a member of the funeral committee. No. Okay. Convenient scapegoats. That's what the media have always been. But out there, within the context of the media, as a channel of communication or interrogation of issues, we're hearing, listening to family representatives and spokespersons engaged in disputes as to where exactly the old good professor came from, or hailed from. There was even talk of DNA on your sister radio station, Asampa, by a family representative who was making a case for their side. We had politicians, you know, on the side of the ruling party, telling us it would be Flagstaff House, it could be Marine Drive, it could be Nkrumah Mausoleum. All these guys were only using the media as a channel of communication, a transmission belt. That's what it was. And men of God, prominent men of God, respectable ones, also chipped in their suggestions. I believe we all had Reverend, is it Bakar? It's not a reverend, it's bigger than that. Bishop. Yes, Archbishop.
The most reverend.
Most reverend, yeah.
Indeed, I asked that question when he joined us on the Super Morning Show, and he provided an answer.
Yes, in a very careful, disciplined way, he made an intervention. It wasn't the media. It was the media that had provided him with a platform, and he had obliged and was making a contribution. So really, maybe there were some of us who engaged in discussions on the same media platform, social commentary and all the rest, serial callers all calling. Yes, some amount of ugly noises out there, but I'm not too sure if the media should be held or can be held responsible for whatever negatives came out of that. But I'll be honest with you, personally, instinctively, I was uncomfortable with how things were going. And I was asking myself whether, as a nation, we hadn't learned our lessons, or we're not learning from lessons of history. You know, this was unprecedented, let's be honest, let's be fair. First time ever that a sitting president had died, okay? And so the shock waves and all sorts of things will bring a certain extra dimension to it. But we had lost heads of states before, and some of them, their deaths came with also some controversy. You recall Nkrumah had some controversy, even that one went beyond the borders of Ghana, where the Guinean authorities were not ready to release his remains. And it had to take the personal intervention of the Nigerian president, then a head of state, General Gowon, to get us to get a body here. And Dr. Liman, if you recall, there were problems between the family and the government, you know. So, and these things are never really good anytime they do happen, regardless of the sources or the ramifications. It's just not good for the spirit of the nation. And so I was thinking that, oh, at least we could avoid that syndrome relative to Professor Mills's demise. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So I was feeling very uncomfortable with the situation. Now, it's also not very fair to pin the Flagstaff House, the choice of Flagstaff House, or the proposed choice of Flagstaff House as a burial ground onto the shoulders of Oni Aruna Idrusu, even though he did the first disclosure, which, with the benefit of hindsight, we all can judge it as premature. But subsequent to that, I think I heard Atudazi also saying that there was almost a consensus within the committee that Flagstaff House would be the venue. And I have it on authority that indeed the committee had virtually agreed on that basis. Perhaps the public reactions and all the things that went on may have informed a revision of the decision. So it is not really fair to single out an individual, to personalize that gaffe if it is a gaffe. I think the committee will have to take collective responsibility for that particular situation. Having said that, so far I think so good. Now that the committee has held a press conference, I've outlined the program, have told us definitely where the burial ground will be. We need to come back to what we did in the first week or before the first week, where it was clear, unity, of purpose. We're all grieving in harm and unity. And I think that's where we should go back to. And so that we can quickly deal with this situation. It began so well, Chief of Staff informing two former presidents, leaving presidents, press release quickly coming out so as to curtail any rumor mongering, and the parliament meeting quickly the same day to swear in a president. Of course, a letter H would advise that delay is understandable. So we had gone the way on the road very almost smoothly, and the whole world was praising us till these small problems came in. We may learn our lessons from there. My attitude is that at this stage, the focus should be on the burial of our former president, and after which I think we can deal with other issues you asked. The question about the president's is it post-independence birth thing. Standing on its own, maybe it means nothing because he stated a fact. But facts on their own mean nothing. It's only when you relate them to other facts that you get a significance. The environment within which he made that statement. I was listening to radio when you could hear somebody shout, you say, yeah, Hamo, that kind of thing. It's true, it was a funeral situation, but the sound bites, I felt uncomfortable immediately. I'm politically experienced, I'm not boasting. But for me, even if I felt that, come on, this is a bit odd. So I think we should not dismiss those who are suggesting that it had a potential of undermining the spirit of the moment, okay? Now we are going to see, beyond this barrier, after this barrier, if that particular statement is not brought onto the campaign platform, then I would admit that perhaps it was just a flash in the pan. But I can tell you, predictably, it may come onto the fore as a campaign platform. And when that happens, people will see why others before then were making a legitimate case. So, but it is just one out of a flash, many issues, and I'm not prepared to overrate that. But I think one should be fair and say that in terms of sound bites, it makes people uncomfortable. It did not go, it was not in tune with the spirit of the moment, in my candid opinion.
What do you make? And while at that, I would also be asking, with what is left ahead of us, this 1 week to finish off and maybe a few days after that, your advice on how best as a nation, you've hinted at how we should go, but perhaps some clarity on what exactly we should do as a nation to ensure that cloud of unity with which we're handling everything goes on. But before you answer that, what do you think about those who are suggesting that perhaps even before we lay the old man to rest, some sort of communication, possibly about a cause of death or maybe a coroner's report or some responses to some of the speculation we're reading in newspapers may be necessary?
That should wait after the burial. Those are issues that will not be wished away by anybody. As far as I'm concerned, those are legitimate issues, okay? I've heard so many things, and some of the things I've heard are coming from within the system and highly, very reliable, sources. They may be true, they may not be true. We have to verify them. But I think, again, my instincts kick against interrogating those issues now. If one or two people have raised it, perhaps they've just reminded us that these are issues that we should look at post-burial. Okay? As the nation develops, consolidates its democratic culture, we discussed it last week, even the question of the health status of a president, especially if there's public concern and visible problems. ought to be interrogated, maybe responsibly by Parliament at a certain stage. After all, we'll be spending money to take care of that president. I'm not talking of Professor Mills, I'm making a general statement. Once it's public funds that we spend, there must be a committee of Parliament that could be scrutinizing those things. You know, it's not just presidents, even public officers of a certain status. You know, so to be honest with you, that issue is legitimate. I'm not sure. There may be a legal regime already that guides things like that, but there's a special breed of personalities, presidents. They're special, and so when issues of this nature become of high public interest, and there's an element of doubt and controversy, you do justice to it by bringing greater transparency. Is it sunshine or sunlight to bear on the issue? So I don't think anybody should be worried about those questions, but let's defer them.
Till after the burial.
Sure.
And yes, go ahead, Susan.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but a coroner's report happens if the person dies outside the hospital and you have suspicions about the death. So we're not talking of a coroner's report, are we?
I mentioned that because if you read some of the stories and the speculation, it leads them to ask that maybe, and that's why I said maybe a cause of death.
Okay.
Or if those speculations are anything to go by, maybe a coroner's report.
Oh, okay. Because he did die in the hospital, unless we are also very suspicious about that. But, for me, I tend to agree with Honorable Doansa that how does it affect the price of Gary on the market? You understand? They ought to, yes, we ought to find the cause of death, and I think that it's something that should be done. But I don't think that it should be a public document where it will lead to all sorts of discussions, etc., etc. It should be on a need-to-know basis, okay? The records should be there. This is what, unless we are suspicious that he didn't die from natural causes or from something that was imminent, okay? Where we think that something untoward happened along the line. Yes, then that one, there is important for it to be a public document for us to know. But personally, I would think that it should those who need to know, it may bring closure in terms of to his family. His widow ought to know, maybe his brothers, his sisters, his children, they ought to know, and it may bring closure. This is what killed our relation, But
you don't think it's something for the entire
No, I don't think so. Because if we actually do think that something untoward happened,
no, okay. I mean, even if nothing untoward happened, you don't think it's something that...
No, maybe just a statement that they've done it, nothing untoward, he died from natural causes. Finish. I mean, that should be enough for us. Because in this country, we have a tendency to nitpick on certain things that detract us from the things that are important in this country, okay? So you would find that then his autopsy report for the next 2-3 weeks becomes, something that is on every radio, every station. And we are worried about our lights going off, our taps not running. When I go to the market, I'm buying plantain for 35 cedis. I'm more worried about that. But then all the discussion then becomes focused on this autopsy report. I think that we want to move away from that. It should be on a need-to-know basis and not a public document.
Whatever the circumstances within which a president dies, even before he got to the hospital where he died, and the issue of food, water, and the rest, they are not mutually exclusive, as far as I'm concerned. They are not. And at this stage, we do not have the full complement of those questions being raised. I know 1 or 2 people have said something. My brother Eduas has speculated on some of the things people are talking about. Post-burial, some people may they articulate in a concise manner things that they have heard or have been told. Then perhaps it will be within the domain of Parliament as an appropriate authority to be seized with those things and find out whether they have any merit. Because some of them, indeed, if turn out to be true, will be very, very serious. Okay? I am resisting to
No, are you telling us something and so what happened?
No, I'm not saying so.
No, he hasn't said that.
I'm saying that zooming when the time comes, post-burial.
Yeah.
Because I said
I agree with you, post-burial,
that
yes.
Post-burial, when we are all finished with this job, and information is put forward relative to the circumstances, right first from the presidency, and how the president got to the hospital, and what happened at the hospital. And if indeed you see that there were lapses, who tells you that is not a subject for serious public interrogation? Because it could happen again. And you ought to do things to avoid those things. You learn lessons from commissions and omissions surrounding this thing. I'm saying right now, we are even moving to the area that I don't feel comfortable in going in. So I'm saying that let's wait. If we verify information, I will believe that the appropriate authority will be Parliament. A member of Parliament could raise it on the floor of the House. And beyond that, they may decide, masters of their own rules and procedures, how to go about it. I'm not going to sit here and actually even prescribe a way forward. But I'm saying that if the information turns out, and I'm not talking of somebody having murdered him, no, or poisoned him. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about perhaps the administrative machinery, the operational machinery that was in place. Was it activated properly and timely or not? If it turns out that it wasn't, that's a subject for public interrogation.
So I want to give Nana Komia and Ms. Eduasari a quick opportunity to have their say on the final bit of our conversation. On this one-week celebration, questions about a cause of death or an autopsy report or maybe even a coroner's report if there's any grounds for that. Before we wrap up. Nana, I'll start with you and then I'll give Honorable Eduasari the final word.
Thank you, Kojo. I think Kweku Bakun has dealt very well with the need for this kind of information to be given out. What I would like to add is that it is sunshine that dispels uncertainty and rumors and darkness. It seems to me that it is the same attitude that was taken in the last 2.5 or 3 years about the president's health that led to so much speculation and so much time being devoted to discussing his health because there was no sunshine on the matter. And look at the suddenness of his death. If there is still no sunshine, the speculations will continue. But you see, I don't even think this should be reduced into some partisan politicking. What does the laws of Ghana say in these circumstances? For me, that is the crux of the matter. What does the law say when a person dies in the circumstances in which the president died? What does the laws of Ghana say?
Do you know what the law says?
You say, they will say, oh, I don't believe so. I would like competent bodies and institutions to pronounce on it. The medical authorities, what does the medical ethics say when an event happens in the way that it happened? What does the law say when such an event happens in the way it is happening? Then we'll be making progress. And I believe that is where we should be shifting the argument. But sunshine, transparency. Let's learn from how we treated the president's health. The extraordinary things we had to do just to hide the fact that the president was not well. Let's not repeat the same. So let's throw sunshine on it. I'm also disappointed in the earlier contribution by my good friend Eduasari. And what is he talking about? That it is because this is the first time a president has died in office. That is why these blunders are taking place. There's absolutely no excuse for them. So it's because it's the first time the president has died, so you should go and promote yourself at the 1 week celebration. It's excusable to go and promote yourself at the 1 week celebration because this is the first time. It is not. It was appalling, and let's admit it so we don't repeat it. Now, we're being told that when you criticize, it means that you are unsettled and that you are old lady and the bones have been mentioned, and so you are jittery and you don't want to move forward. You know, and everybody is to be blamed. The NPP, yeah, the media. Everybody is to be blamed except the NDC. This is the attitude of Eduasare and his collaborators. Can you understand that? When all political parties have suspended their promotional activities to show respect to the departed president, and at the urging of the new president, John Mahama, on his first public statement, when he called for one week mourning and flags to be half-mast and all of that. And so political parties have suspended their promotional activities. You then go and engage in promotional activities. And when we talk about it, you say we are jittery, we are old ladies, so we don't like bones. We are not going to move forward. We are to blame, we and the press. That is not on, my brother. So if you've done something that is wrong or that could have been done better, admit it so we can move forward. This business about the announcement of the burial, that one to what is due to what? The suddenness of the death? If you haven't come to a definite conclusion, why make public statements? Is it difficult to just do this simple thing?
Mr. Eduasare, wrap it up for us.
Well, it's as if I could predict where Nana, the aspects of my presentation that Nana will pick on, and he did justice to.
I am an old lady.
But Kojo, let me be very frank here. 2012 elections will be about age. The age factor will play a key role. Trust me, it will play. I'm just, confirming what my senior brother just said. It will come in, please. Certainly, the two personalities or at the forefront of 2012 election is Leonardo and using the results of the 2008 election.
Say it again.
Okay, at least these are the two
parties. Say it again. No.
Okay.
No.
Well, CPP, I'm sure, will do something better this year, maybe, if they put their
Don't be
acts together.
patronizing. Why you say it?
Oh, you see, I don't want to draw CPP into this discussion this morning. I have roots there, but I am not.
They are not a political party.
Wrap it up for
Right,
me.
let me try.
Sunshine.
Yes, I agree. I said it earlier that for me, some of the things some of us have even heard, have also heard, give rise to support that if we can get some light will be thrown on it, the sequence and all of those things. I mean, it shouldn't be difficult for maybe the office of the chief of staff to, come out and, after the burial with some information regarding where it started, how it ended, and all of that. It will just put to rest some of these issues. And they should just be open. I'm not sure, as Susan said, as for the scavenging of the issues and how it will be turned left, right, center, upside down, it is to be expected. But of course, we would have done what is proper and what is important. And for me, that is where I will rest.
Let me read some of the tweets being sent by our listeners and our viewers into our conversation. My Twitter handle is KO Nkrumah. So if you are listening to us or watching us and you want to send us a tweet, please do so. One of our listeners tweeting under the name Solomon Mensah 8 says, Eduasare's government is confused and they lack ideas. They are only seeking to take advantage of this situation. Hakim 112 says the president was only asking for support now that he's president and fairly young. He never talked about votes. This mischief is too much. Lexus Agri says, I will tell the NDC communication team they should know when it's appropriate and how to come out to the public with information. K. Kisiedu says, tell Mr. Eduasare to tell his people to be sure before they come out with information next time. Kofi Kra says, it's a joke that it's only in Ghana that the cause of death of a sitting president is a private matter. Nana COZ says, if a committee was set up to investigate the death of a minister's wife at the police hospital, then why shouldn't we do same for our president? Grant says, why do we always brush aside incompetence by saying we will learn our lessons from it? How many more lessons to learn to get to it? He goes on to say, a coroner's inquest should commence before a burial. Otherwise, an exhumation may be necessary. Kweku says, What is the word? Is it untoward or what? The word is untoward. Untoward. K. Free says, I think the coroner's report is not a private matter, but yes, it can wait until after the burial. Send us your thoughts, 1422 across networks, or put your thoughts on our Facebook, or facebook.com/joy997, or send us a tweet at KO Nkrumah. I will share them with the rest of the world. And on the occasion of the 1 week commemoration of the former president's passing, the information came through that Kwesi Amissah-Arthur, governor of the central bank, has been nominated, has been tapped by President John Mahama to be his vice president. His naming raised a bit of a debate in Parliament about the most appropriate process to use for his approval. But now it's been settled. On Monday morning at 9 a.m., he will face the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. And since his naming, I'm sure...
Appointments Committee.
The Appointments Committee, forgive me. Since his naming, I'm sure you have, heard about his record as governor, you've heard about his political record, or may I say the lack of it, and you've heard some of the comments from within the NDC. Victor Smith made a few comments, later had to retract his comments. Susan, what do you make of Mr. Amissah-Arthur and the jostling that has gone on and around since his name was put forward?
Basically, I think that the NDC don't have mechanisms for addressing concerns internally. I mean, for a regional minister to get onto the radio station and sort of publicly disagree with his president's choice was awful. I thought it was really out of place. If he had concerns, then the last thing to have done was to get onto a radio station, but address it through the internal channels to say, okay, this is the president's choice, but these are reservations, but not to get onto the radio station. I thought that, and it may mean that they do not have internal mechanisms for dealing with dissenting voices or dealing with contrary voices to certain decisions, and that must be looked at. And people must be sanctioned if there are the mechanisms there and they use outside channels. I think that it's totally inappropriate, especially for a regional minister to do that, especially when it's his sitting president and has said that this is my choice. He could have done it in a better way. But this is something that we see all the time. People, and I just mentioned that people getting onto the radio station to air out their grievances even before using channels. And you find it in all aspects of our life. People call you Oponkuma, I was supposed to have been paid yesterday and I didn't get paid. And they probably haven't told their boss their grievances, but yet they've picked up the phone and they've called a radio station to say this thing. I think we need to start moving away from that. We are talking about strong institutions, strong institutions. Strong institutions are built by strong men. We ought to live up to it and say, we want to build these institutions. These are the channels we want to use for addressing concerns, irrespective of what your concerns are. This is how you must address it. And if people don't follow lay down protocols, they must be punished for it. I think maybe people spoke to Victor Smith and he's come out with this apology, but it's too late. When you utter certain words, and it creates a certain kind of discontent, and no matter what apology that you come out with, you've already created that kind of discontent, and I think that wasn't right. But talking about the gentleman in question, Mr. Amissah-Arthur, and the people, questioning his newness or his oldness to a party, I think that we ought to be very careful here. Yes, loyalty is important, long service is important, okay? Taking the fact that he has already shown himself to have long service. I mean, if you look at it from PNDC days to the NDC days, we're talking about 20-something years, And so he's been in politics almost, 20, 27, 28 years. You get me? He's been there a long time. But irrespective of that, even if he had been new, and he had been shown to be competent, and he had shown loyalty in the short time that he was in the party, I think that people should not have talked about this, that, we don't know him. Because long service, yes, but there may be somebody who has come into a party or come into an institution that shows more loyalty, shows more contribution to somebody who has been in that party forever. We see it all the time. There have been people in institutions forever. Somebody new comes in, he sort of peps the institution up. So that should not have been a problem. Now, people also think politics is about those of us who come on TV and on radio. That's not what politics is about. You know, politics is about moving people, about influencing people, and that can be done without sitting on a platform and shouting. A lot can be done. And we need to encourage that. Yes, it is good that some people take it upon themselves to do the public speaking, but some people, they don't need that. I mean, they just have to get the wheels moving. And so if he has done that, and he has been getting the wheels moving, and the vice president has seen his work and has been pleased with it and says, come and assist me to do better, I think that should be taken in good faith. People are saying he's a technocrat and not a politician. Why can't you be both? I mean, you can be a technocrat and you can be a politician. You can be an academic and be a politician. I mean, all of us need to be political in one way or the other. So they are not mutually exclusive. You are either a technocrat or a politician. You can be both. There are some people who are methodological in their actions, okay, and the things that they do, and yet they're very political. And so it's good if you get that combination there. And I think that, with all due respect, I don't think our president, economics is his forte, you understand? So if he thinks that he wants to choose somebody whose economics, is good, and the economy is important, because this is what, I mean, people feel, and he wants somebody who is competent in it, can explain it, has a good grasp of it, and he wants that person to partner him. I think that we should look at it. They have 6 months to prove themselves, or no, less. They have about 5 months to prove themselves. If we think that in the 5 months, it shows promise, people might just say, oh, we want them to continue. But if they don't show promise, hey.
Victor Smith has apologized if his comments were misconstrued, but he's explained that he was only trying to draw a distinction between the president naming a vice president and the flag bearer of their party choosing a vice presidential candidate. And I'm tempted to ask of you, what would be your expectation, that the president runs with Mr. Arthur, or for some other politically calculated reason at some point he looks for somebody who maybe other members in the party will be more excited about to run with?
That's wrong. In the first place, Victor Stick's talking about him being misconstrued. He could have done it through the party channels and be misconstrued there than doing it in the public airwaves, and that's it. So it's neither here nor there. He should not have spoken on radio or whatever media that finish. He could have, channeled his things privately in his party mechanisms for that. But so that's, but I mean, in terms of changing, it's politically correct to choose who you would run with now, not later. I mean, I think that I don't think that is advisable to choose somebody now and change the person. Look, given that by September, okay, you should take your running mate's name to the Electoral Commission. So you have 6 weeks. What is the point in giving us a vice president or somebody's name for 6 weeks, and you're going to change it and have,
So you'll be surprised if it happens
I
that
will
way.
definitely be surprised if the name changes for the running mate, 6 weeks down the line, and then you choose a different person. I think that they carefully thought about it, or I hope that they carefully thought about it and have chosen somebody who they're going to use as a running mate for the election.
20 minutes to 11. I'll come to you shortly, Nana Kumia. I want to go to the phone lines right now. We're joined by Professor Ajiman Bedu Akosa, one-time head of the Ghana Health Service. He's a member of the CPP as well. I want to get some education from him. When do you do an autopsy? When do you get a cause of death? When do you get a coroner's report? Prof, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And let me apologize for the quality of that connection on the phone line. Prof, when do you do an autopsy? Must there be some circumstances that require an autopsy, or is it mandatory?
No, there are circumstances that require autopsy. There are two types of autopsy. One is what is being called the coroner. The coroner's autopsies are mandatory. And that is, if anybody dies in an institution, whether it's in a school, whether it's in the prison, whether it's in a convention, you know, anywhere where, you know, death occurs in circumstances that the coroner needs to understand. Or if you get into hospital but die within 24 hours of admission into hospital, or if you die at home. So those three major categories require a coroner's autopsy, and those are mandatory. And it is the request of the coroner, who in Ghana is a magistrate. It is the magistrate that requests the autopsy, and the autopsy report goes only to the magistrate. It is the magistrate who will choose to do what he or she so pleases with the autopsy report. Then there is what is called a request for hospital autopsy, where somebody who's been on admission for quite a while, either receiving treatment, dies, and the medical team are not certain of the circumstances immediately leading to death. And they might request for a hospital autopsy, and then that is done for the benefit of the team that requests the autopsy. So those are the two major categories. Now let me say that as far as the coroner's autopsies are concerned, it is basically to ascertain whether death was natural or unnatural. The coroner is not interested in the academics of the autopsy. As you know, you would expect that the medical team requesting an autopsy will be very interested in the academics of the circumstances leading to death. The coroner wants to know whether the death was natural or unnatural. And therefore, it becomes relatively easy. As soon as you can determine that the cause of death is natural, then, you know, that is it. But you see, there will always be telltale signs of an unnatural death. And the telltale signs will be obvious to a trained pathologist. So that in most cases like that, you will then take blood sample, urine sample, you will tie the stomach plus its content, you will take bits of kidney, the liver, the brain, and those are sent for the moment to the Ghana Standards Authority Toxicology Laboratory. And they would ascertain whether there are any poisons, any chemicals, or any untoward things that could have led to death. So those are the things there. The other thing is that you would analyze and look at the external of the body, whether there are any marks of violence. You will look at the cervical spine, whether, you know, to ascertain whether there's a fracture.
So if I may interrupt you, in this instance where the person dies less than 24 hours after being taken to a medical facility, there will need to be a coroner's autopsy. That's what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, you also talked about it being a request from the magistrate. Am I right in assuming that this is the magistrate in whose jurisdiction this particular incident took place?
Absolutely, yes.
I see. And when it is done, this report is issued to the family or to somebody else?
No. It is to the coroner. It's the coroner who requests the autopsy, and therefore the report goes to the coroner. It doesn't go to the family.
And this coroner is a magistrate, am I right?
Yes, it is, yes.
I see. And from your experience, what are then the following processes? What, they file it somewhere there in the magistrate's office or at the judicial service, or what? Particularly for senior persons, like the president that we're talking about. What's the process?
No, the process will be that there will be a police who will be attending the police from the police station. See, what happens is that you go to the police station. The police station would serve you with the coroner's papers that has been signed by the magistrate operating within the jurisdiction. It is that will be sent to the hospital, and on the basis of that, the hospital will do the autopsy. Now, once it is done, the coroner's report is written, and the attending police officer will pick the report and send it to the coroner, in this case the magistrate operating within the jurisdiction. Now once that is done, once the autopsy is done, The immediate cause of death is written on one of the sheets of the coroner's papers, and that is what is given to the relation. That just states the cause of death, so that the relation can then register the death and then get the burial permit and move on to bury. But the final report of the coroner's autopsy goes to the coroner.
And my final question, who triggers the police process? Is it the hospital or somebody else?
Well, I mean, most instances, it will be the family. Once the death is reported, the family will be asked to go to the closest police station to report that death has occurred within 24 hours of admission to hospital, or death has occurred at home, or death has occurred in an institution. And then the police will raise the necessary documents that will be then sent to the pathology department for the process to begin. And invariably, there will be an attending police officer from the police station where the coroner's papers were released. And then once the autopsy is done, the report is ready, and the police officer who attended the autopsy will come for the report and send it to the magistrate.
And finally, can you opt out of this process? Can a family opt out of this process? Or can people close to the person opt out of this process that it's okay, it's not necessary?
No, as far as the coroner is concerned, you know, in this country, sadly, the coroner system doesn't operate very well. But in the UK, where I've worked, what happens is that once the case is reported to the coroner on immediate analysis can say, no, this is all right, we don't need to do a coroner's autopsy. So even though it might fit into the category of coroner's autopsy, they can use their, discretion and say, as far as we're concerned, this is fine. If if there are no mitigating circumstances or there are no suspicious circumstances, then that can be allowed to go. But because after...
And I think I've lost him somewhere there. The line is very terrible. My sincere apologies for the poor quality of that connection. But he was explaining to us that when somebody dies outside a hospital, or when somebody dies within 24 hours of being admitted to a hospital, you require what they call the coroner's autopsy report. Usually the process is that you would trigger a police process. The family or some other persons will inform the police. They will give them the necessary documentation, which is taken back to the hospital for the doctors to conduct an autopsy and fail, that autopsy report. It's then sent back to the magistrate, within whose jurisdiction this death was reported or was reportedly or was reported to have occurred, and subsequent to that they will file a copy with the magistrate and then perhaps give the family another copy. I was asking whether you can opt out. That's what he was responding to, that no, you cannot opt out, but unfortunately the practice has been that here in Ghana it's not done very often. If we do get a connection with him, a better connection with him, we'll wrap up our conversation with him. That's Professor Ajman Akosa giving us some education on that. About 10 minutes before we hit 11 on Newsfile, we're talking about Mr. Arthur, and I just heard from Suzanne Nana and Mr. Dressler. Let me hear from you, and then I'll give quickly the final word. And while you're at that, tell me about the vetting as well. Why this brouhaha over, what should be the best approach?
Well, thank you, Kojo. My brother Idwasa made a statement which I thought was very curious. He said that age is going to be the main one of the main campaign.
This is going to be a factor.
Major factor. Well, I can dictate for the NDC what they should use as factors in the campaign. Of course, age is always important, but if you push it, it also will have its own negative consequences. In the first place, John Mahama will not be the youngest president we've had in this country. Great leaders like Kwame Nkrumah were in their 40s. Hilary Liman, when he was elected, he was in his 40s, 45 or 46 or so. Jerry Rawlings, when he was elected in 1992, he was in his 40s, I believe. So he will not be the youngest president at 53 or so. So I don't see how you're going to play up this age thing. Also, it is not basically about your age. Otherwise, we might as well get Edwasari, who is in his 20s, to be the president. It is your ideas. It is the policies and the programs that you have for the development of young people. Skills training, education, jobs. Those are the things that make you relevant to young people, not your age. And you look at the NDC, in the 3.5 years that they have been in power, what unique policy have they brought to foster the development of young people in this country? They came and made the National Youth Employment Program, to which has been a big salvation to them, stemmed the tide of the foot soldier agitations that rocked the country in the first year. What else are they doing? Skills training. These are all policies.
Discussing VIP.
Oh, please, you use your time. I have my time. the skills training and all of that. These are things that have been run since Kwame Nkrumah's time. When they came, and this is very significant, they came and left and met a youth policy and an action plan left for them by the NPP, which had been approved by cabinet. As we speak, that youth policy that talks about the development of young people in Ghana in a systematic manner, proper budgeting and all of that, is gathering dust. The man that they put at the Youth Council, Sekou Nkrumah, when he spoke about it, that there's a policy that I'm not allowed to use, he was sacked. They also came and met a national employment policy and an action plan that is ready for implementation, that talks about specific ways to generate employment in this country for young people. They've put it aside for inexplicable reasons. Now, this is your record. And when we are talking about youth, you say because you are 50-something, age is a factor.
Okay, so now talk about Emisata.
This Emisata matter, I don't know the man very well. I know him from a distance. He appears to be affable and a warm personality, looking at him from the distance. Those who have worked with him have said that he has very good human relations, working relationship with his staff, and all of that. And I have no doubt that he will bring a certain dignity to the office of vice president. The office of the vice president is just a heartbeat away from the presidency, as we have seen in the last couple of days. So I have no doubt that he would bring the needed dignity to the position. As for his track record, I would not vote for his track record. As the governor of the Bank of Ghana, the central bank, the primary responsibility that he has is the management of monetary policy, particularly the value of the currency. Now, when you imagine that the currency in the last 3.5 years under his tenure as governor of Bank of Ghana, the currency is losing almost 100% of its value. That is frightening. The repercussions on prices and the cost of living and welfare are totally different.
100%?
Almost.
What's your basis?
I'm saying almost.
100%?
I say almost 100%.
Wow.
Also, it was 1 cedi 12 pesos. It's now over 2 cedis. It's almost 100% loss in value over 3 years. The previous 8 years, it moved from 72 pesos to 1 cedi 12 pesos. It's just about 60% over 8 years. Now, in 3.5 years, you've moved it to a loss of value of almost 100%. It's serious. And you see, the critical thing is that this is not statistic that, just statistics for its mere sake. It has a major impact on prices, the cost of living, and hence the welfare. The Ghanaians are being strangulated. It's like there's a rope around our necks, which is being slowly tightened. Go and check the level of prices especially from January up to today, a direct result of the fall in the value of the cedi. So for that track record, I would not vote for him. Interest rates today are creeping near 30%. We've been told inflation is single digit, which is remarkable. But look at the level of prices. Everything else is gone up by triple digits, 100%, 150, 200, 400%. And yet the averaging, they say, is single digits. You can understand. But this is the track record that will be brought into play as we go towards the election. But on the other things that have happened, you have Victor Smith, a minister of state, publicly kicking against the selection of Mr. Emisata as a vice president. Well, he says that it will mean that the man will automatically become the running mate, and he's kicking against it. I mean, if you have the vice president, Mr. Emisata, are you going to select another person as running mate? It will be a kick in the teeth of Mr. Emisata. It will show that your choice of vice president is dodgy. So obviously, the person that is going to be selected as John Mahama's vice president should also partner him in the election. Otherwise, it will cloud the whole decision in some negative light. Now you have a minister of state who's coming out to kick against it. He's apologized, so we can leave it at that. But it's not just the minister of state. You have members of the National Executive Committee of the NDC also kicking out against the selection of Mr.
Really?
Emisata.
Cool.
Oh, the organizer, Mr. Boatinjan also, I think that's his name. He's expressed sentiments that are similar to what Mr. Victor Smith expressed. Now, for me, it's frightening that what does it mean that a selection of Mr. Emisata was not done with the agreement of the National Executive Committee of the NDC? What is happening? For me, that is where it's frightening. That if so early in the day, you're going to have National Executive members, National Executive Committee members of the NDC speaking out publicly against choices of the president, it's frightening.
But this is not uncommon. In 2007 or 2008, when you selected Bawumia, not everybody was, thrilled about it.
Even the recent selection.
Look at him. All of a sudden, even the recent selection.
So please respond to my question.
I'll respond to your question. Kojo, I'm saying so early in the day, if the party cannot have a consensus behind the president, that is serious. Because you would expect that the choice would have been made, would have been put before the National Executive Committee, if even for no broader consultation, at least the National Executive Committee of the NDC, Chairman, General Secretary, Organizer, the functional executives. Now, if they are coming out to express worry, then the impression is that they were not consulted, or there was no consensus in the choice. I'm saying so early in the day, if this is what is going to happen, then the NDC is going to be horribly more divided. And for a minister of state, if he doesn't agree to run from station to station, poo-pooing the choice, it's extraordinary. And for national executive members to do the same, like Susan said, even if they had been consulted and they couldn't have a quick meeting among themselves to decide the way forward, but they would jump from station to station, and the next day they come and say, we have been misunderstood. We couldn't understand the English that was spoken. So even an insult to us. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And they only have four and a half months to get themselves together to fight an election. And this is the way they are going to go. Then maybe age really will matter.
Tell me, some suggest that finally Bawumia would have found his match.
Well, both of them are in the same business, finance, monetary policy. So it will be very interesting how the two of them will pair up as we go towards the election. The NDC says that they will not attend the presidential platforms, the platforms that will be given to presidential candidates. That is said that by tradition, some tradition, sitting presidents do not engage in this sort of activity. Well, so we may be denied the chance to see Bawumia and Emisata on the same platform, unless the NDC flip-flops again on this matter. Now, on this matter of age,
there's a dissuading them by using such a word? You could have used a better word than flip-flop.
There's a candidate, actually, an elected presidential candidate, I think it's Ayariga or something, who's 40 years or so. So if this age thing, we might as well just take him by the NDC and then just forget about it all. But essentially,
why has this thing hit you so badly?
When the man speaks and he comments, he says you are unsettled. You are an old lady, you don't want to hear about bones.
For me, and let me hear from you. Sorry, I'll give Kuku the final say on this one. Wrap up for me.
What was his name again? You said
Hassan Ayariga.
No, it was senior, what?
wrap up your point.
Swagger?
Yeah, it's called swagger.
Oh,
wrap up for me and let me
go
hear
and do
from
your
you.
swagger somewhere.
Mr. Dwasai,
Yes,
respond to this charge for me that, you know, even though you usually hear of a few dissenting voices, perhaps this has been a bit odd, coming within these difficult times, and it may not be very good and easy for you, looking at the limited time you have to recover and maybe even prosecute a good campaign.
Kojo, you see, I think as a party, NDC has really, in my personal opinion, has performed creditably over the past, let's say, almost 2 weeks since our president left us, former president left us. This issue about the choice of vice president, a running mate, or even a flag bearer could have sparked all manner of challenges in some other party. Trust me. You see, because we've done it so expertly, so, you know,
Nicely.
almost without any problem, our colleagues are trying to finger something by all means. Okay, and that is exactly what I can sense from Nana's. You know, of course, there have been challenges. We'll come to that.
We brought Victor Smith.
No, you didn't. But it's as
Why
if.
are you blaming everybody but yourself?
No, listen, I'll come to that. But what is your beef? That's the problem. What is your beef? Let us flop so that you can excel.
But we are happy.
You understand?
No, we're
I
happy
am
that we
worried
are
about you trying to direct us from afar. Do you understand? You thrive when we fall. So why don't you bask in whatever you want to call
But
it?
that is what we are. We are basking.
Fine, go ahead.
Yeah, we
But
are
you
going ahead
keep
to
basking. But I can assure you that, as I said earlier, age will play a role.
Yeah.
That is underlined.
We should go for it.
Anyway, with regards to the choice of the vice president, I think that choice is a sole prerogative of the president. So certainly when it comes out with a name, I believe some considerations would have taken place before that choice. And I want to credit him with that, whatever considerations that went into selecting Mr. Emisa Atta. As to whether he's been around for long or he hasn't been active or we don't know him, we know him and all of that. I think personally, I have known him not as like, I haven't come into contact with him that much, but from the fringes, at least I know he played a role during the PNDC era. He was, I think, a co-deputy minister for finance when Victor Salome was there and all of that. So certainly he's been around for a while. And as to competence and all of that, it is not for Nana Kumia to school anybody this morning about what his competencies have been over the period. If we want to interrogate, to borrow my senior brother's words, one of his words, if we want to interrogate who among the staff of Bank of Ghana, we are told Baumia, lately that's what we are hearing, that he has transformed the economy of Zimbabwe. Even when the inflation is around 1,000+%, that is transformation we are talking about. So we will come to the nitty-gritties where we will take the bull by the horn. So
Zimbabwe's
it's early.
inflation today is not 1,000%.
We will check from your Google.
Do you know Ghana's inflation?
No, you check. Okay, let me go ahead. What I want to say, Parliament on Monday will vet this man. People are asking whether he should be vetted in public or in camera. For me, I think, as we say in Parliament, it's inconsequential. At the end of the day, people are agitating that. It shouldn't, I mean, especially those of us in the majority should have pushed for an in-camera, vetting process or approval process. But for me, a lot of people seem to have some misconception about the way Parliament operates. You know, and for me, and sometimes they come out so strongly as if they are in there with us, they know the process, they know everything that goes on there. You see, this committee can go into a meeting and decide not to say anything, or ask even one question, and still write a report to
Let me read you a text.
Okay.
Why should the vice presidential nominee get a pass from public hearings? Isn't the whole point of our constitution transparency and accountability? We don't want just anybody as our vice president. If the public have not scrutinized him through competitive elections, then Parliament should. This business of him being higher than Speaker, so it would not be proper to vet him, is porous. The vice president is not higher than the Speaker. Those who say so don't understand our constitutional structure. By order of precedence in terms of protocol, the VP comes before Speaker, but that doesn't mean he's senior to the Speaker. Consider this: if the leaders of the three branches of the government assemble, will the VP be there? Nana Santibide, to sending this text, suggests that at the end of the day, you know, it must be done in public. It shouldn't, you know, be a whole exercise of trying to shield him from.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that. For me, I don't see the point, because if you understand the way Parliament works or the committee works, we still have majority. We can make any decision that we want. But of course, nobody knows what is going to happen there. Okay, we are now going to receive, there's a memo out there asking for people to put in petitions and all of that. So that will depend on the whatever petition that will be received and all of that. So those things will determine the course of the
so it's early days
process. It's early days yet.
Tell me about the politics. Would you be surprised, like Susan says she would be, if Imisatha is not maintained as a ticket?
Well, for me, I want to, the president himself is yet to be confirmed as flag bearer. Okay, so technically, it is wrong or premature to even start talking about running mate at this stage. But
it's not lost on anybody that you don't have much time.
Yes.
You would need to, you know, even if you are waiting for the 1st of September, get your act together behind the scenes.
I agree. You see, you must be strategic in your planning. And I believe if people have challenges or some challenge with the choice, they are, you know, it's their right so to do. But as to whether its implications will affect the party, I beg to differ. The way, what's his name, Mr. Victor Smith went about, I want to put it on record. I think this time round, my senior brother got it all wrong. You know, radio and TV or the media should not be a place where we wash every issue, you know, every now and then. It's wrong. Let's learn to respect structures of the party and use them. We all had choices, okay? We thought Mr. Imisatha's name only appeared a day before the choice was made. Before then, other names had been bandied around, and we all were, you know, trying to figure out who it could be. Then it came out. So it came to some of us as a shock. But after a careful or a cursory look at his stature and what he brings to bear, he described him as a gentleman, and for me, I know Ghanaians want to work with gentlemen, decent people. That is first and foremost, before other things follow. So we are looking at competence, we are looking at what he brings to the ticket. He's a very good speaker. He doesn't have to, when Bawumia came on the scene, people, he couldn't even talk on a platform. We all saw it, 2008. Now he has matured over a period.
And you think he will also get
certainly.
Into that? So Victor's apology, is that the end of dissent, or is that the beginning of worrying times?
Well, I personally thought that, yes, the president should assert his authority on some of these issues. Because, you see...
What does that mean? Fire Victor?
Well, I won't make that suggestion on this platform. But I said the president should assert his authority.
Which means what?
Whatever it means to you, take it. It should assert his authority. That is why, yes, I think that no, apology is cool, but as to whether it goes to fix,
your child irrespective of whether
it goes to again use my brother's words, one of his words, to cure.
Whether it can cure the mischief.
Exactly, whether it can cure the mischief, because I think subordination is important in this matter. Okay, and once it is defied at this point, tomorrow it can happen, and oh, then let's leave it. The next time it happens, before you realize your entire authority is undermined and you can't function properly. So I think the president should be assertive on this matter.
Assertive means what?
Please.
You should sack him.
Nana, I'm going to wrap up with you shortly. Are you done?
Yes.
Tell me, you have confidence that in spite of the sensitivities of Office of the Vice President, this vetting will be handled properly?
I don't understand the worry about the vetting. I've heard arguments that the vice presidential position is very high, and so it should not be vetted. How does vetting by Parliament openly diminish a person or a position? I don't understand it. Ministers of state go for vetting. Judges of the Supreme Court go for vetting. It doesn't diminish their position.
Chumesi Appiah tells me there's been precedent.
Which one?
That Francis Poku was vetted in camera, that Georgina Wood was vetted in camera, and therefore for a sensitive office like this, and I'm talking about the Honorable Chumesi Appiah, Member of Parliament for Senate, for sensitive positions like this, you don't want to put them out in the public and ask them questions and, you know, showcase them on national television.
I don't remember that the Chief Justice was vetted in camera. She was not. She was vetted in the open. Francis Poku, security. This same our thing with security. Security is supposed to take precedence. When you are driving on the road and the police vehicles are coming, they're supposed to take precedence. When an army vehicle is coming, it's supposed to take... Because he was a national security coordinator, that is why a special exemption was made in the case of the Francis Poku. But the Chief Justice, if I remember correctly, was vetted in public. Now, this business that the public vetting would diminish the position, I don't buy it. It gives the man a chance to show what he's made of. And if I were in Mr. Misata's position, I would want a public vetting, especially when people believe he's such an unknown quantity. And it's going to be vetted, his questions that will range on his public record. Public record. I don't think anybody, unless there is something the record that is so debilitating, he was just going to go through. But it will give the public a chance to process Mr. Misata, the vice president, through the parliamentary process.
Let me hear you quickly, and then let me go to Kuku.
You see, that perception of, as if, you know, the public, what will I say, the appointments committee is a place people always feel jittery about. It's because, yes, there are some controversies that will generate, especially when there are, an instance is the Fifi Kwete issue. The other one had to do with, I think, Betty Mould and Madam Amma Benyuado. You know, those were issues that created all kinds of frictions on the panel. So people still carry that fear, or I'm putting fear in quotes, that, look, are we going to sit there and dig out issues and, you know, for all manner of people to ridicule the man before he takes over that high office? That is all.
Mr. Bako, these are unprecedented times, yes, but what do you think?
Yes, but maybe a brief comment on Victor Smith before I proceed to deal with the other issues.
You don't take his apology?
The apology? Well, an attempt to mitigate the gaffe he committed. Job-saving apology. I wouldn't say face-saving. It was timely. If I were in the shoes of the president, I would reshuffle him and send him somewhere else.
You know, sack him.
Well,
Quickly.
I don't.
Well, Quick will make his point.
Because see, this is it. I'm quoting him. On the issue of the vice presidential nominee, I granted a number of interviews intending to clarify that the president's nominee was not necessarily his running mate for the 2012 election. The import of my comment has been misconstrued. I mean, misconstrued by whom? And this is what he said, at least all this is from your website. I'm quoting Victor Smith. I am not comfortable. I can tell you clearly, I've made that point to leadership. And Mr. Atta, for the longer term, is a weakness. It will not help us the way I see politics has been done in this country. We need somebody who will bring us a lot of votes. A person to complement the president. John Mahama has a lot of ground support. But you need to partner him with another strong person who can excite the people. So who misconstrued what? And who? I mean, you see, sometimes honesty and sincerity is also important. You've goofed badly, and you want to apologize. Okay? Just go straight and do so. So the lack of sincerity or honesty behind the apology is, for me, makes it a useless piece.
It should cost him his job.
You know? Well, that the president would decide. The president, of course, might have to do some small shake-up here and there, particularly the AG's office, the deputy there, as far as I'm concerned. It will help. But that's another subject. Vetting. Akomia is right. I've been doing my checks. When I heard that a Chief Justice had been vetted in camera, I'd been checking under the Fourth Republic. Aban was, because we had Acha, who was a holdover from the PNDC era into the Fourth Republic. So I'm sure he didn't go for vetting, he was a sitting CJ. After him came Aban. I've seen records where Aban was vetted, even though it was short notice, and it created some problems because the Bar Association protested that the notice was too short, he didn't come, he didn't have enough time to bring his memorandum. Hawa Yakubu, who was a member of parliament, who questioned Aban on the murder of the judges and other things, also complained about the short notice. And you know there was controversy surrounding Aban's nomination because there was this case in the Supreme Court, the page 28 incident. So within a short time, Parliament unanimously confirmed him. That created some problems, but at least there was public vetting. After Aban was Redu, November 2001, Redu, if you go into Hansard, 9th November, public hearing. If you come down to Georgina Wood, the Aqua, also public hearing. I couldn't access my Hansard, but I remember a lot of things that happened. I watched it on Age and all those things. I watched it on telly. Yeah. So Aqua, public hearing. Georgina Wood, 1st June 2007, public hearing. Okay? So when it comes to CJs, for the records, under this Fourth Republican Constitution, they've all been vetted publicly, with the exception of Acha, who I said was a retained CJ. So let's put that aside. But it is true that the Appointments Committee found a way of vetting Mr. Francis Poku in camera. That too is captured in 7 June 2006 Hansard. And they gave reasons, but there were protests from a section of the committee. And then even when the report had been brought to the floor of the House, Mr. Doajahu raised certain technical issues, saying that he wasn't bothered about whether it was in camera or in public, but he was worried that the committee had been given the discretion to go and vary the standing orders, especially in the case of the Appointments Committee, which is explicit that they must hold their hearings in public. And even though he was checkmated eventually by others, and the Speaker ruled that under Order 199, they could do that variation, where the chairman has discretion to ask strangers to leave the committee hearing. It becomes, if strangers leave, then automatically it is an in-camera hearing. The point is being made that Francis Poku was National Security Coordinator, so he had had a brief, he had done certain things relative to security, and you had to ask some of those questions in camera. It makes sense. The same way, I'll be honest with you, the central bank of this country, there are certain areas too that are sensitive. There are certain questions that we might not want answers given to in public relative to our international business transactions or community and what they should hear or not hear. A chairman could decide when, in those respects, to ask strangers to leave and deal with those aspects in camera. So really, I'm not too sure. I initially was comfortable with the idea of doing an in-camera because it is true. You can have a situation where people can ask all sorts of embarrassing questions, okay? Questions that can lead to undermining the dignity of an individual. Sometimes the questions may not even be well-founded on truth. I've already started reading some dirty pieces in some of the very crude things, unspeakable and unprintable. Those things are not fair to any personality. And I hope no member of parliament would stoop so low and even try to bring those questions to the floor of the Appointments Committee. Vetting has been positive in terms of our constitutional democracy. this Fourth Republic. You know, previously, the first parliament was not too solid. You know, it wasn't too visible, even though 1 or 2 casualties occurred. But right from the second parliament, particularly when J.H. Mensah raised some issues about retained ministers, subsequently, we're doing well. There are still lapses. There are still some areas that they could polish. But I think it's important. It helps. It brings transparency. It brings accountability. So if this will be done in public, and it will be done in a disciplined way, and I don't know, but I have a certain faith that the members of the Appointments Committee will rise to the occasion and deal with this thing with dignity, you know, with finesse. That way, we will not be the losers as a nation.
Talk about the politics of it. Have the voices of dissent caused a fatal injury to the political fortunes of Mr. Arthur? Or is this, and I'm sure it's not lost on you, I mean, I think 2004 or so, or 2003, when candidate Mills was then announced by, President Rawlings at the time, there was some voice of dissent. Baumia, voices of dissent. I don't recall for Aliu Muhammad. But does that necessarily amount to a fatal injury?
No, you were talking of 1996.
96, forgive me.
When candidate Mills made a running mate.
Yes.
He had it was almost total obscurity in terms of the political limelight, in terms of electoral visibility. But he had a giant of a political ticket, a leader, somebody who had been on the scene for too long. I mean, as unconstitutional head of state, and then as constitutional and flag bearer. So it compensated. There was a compensation for that inadequacy that Professor Mills brought to the 1996 ticket of the NDC. But he was a sitting vice president. He lost eventually. His second was with Martin, and I think the third was with Mumuni. He didn't succeed. You see, Emisata, I have known for a long time. It's true, J.H. Mensah is right about the new democratic movement, all those post-AFRC organizations on campus and all the rest. All those things are true. His participation in PNDC, NDC 1. I'm not sure NDC 2 he was dropped. I think, no. Indeed, he's somebody Rawlings had some difficulties with. And one time ordered flight from Tamale. No, so he's been around, and I'm told that even since then, he had been active in NDC politics and campaigning and all the rest. So his loyalty to NDC or his membership, it's not in dispute at all. His longevity with that organization is also not in dispute. But I don't think anybody can argue that when it comes to electoral visibility, political activism, the high profile, the frontline one, he shines. It's not there. This may be the opportunity for him to show that he can also deal with a platform and failed organization. It's relatively obscure when it comes to that level. There's no doubt about that. And I think he should be honest enough to admit it. The fact that he's been long planning in political organization from NDM, NDC, PNDC, and all the rest, still, it is obvious. Why would national organizer of the party have publicly said that, some of the grassroots do not know him? In fact, my brother just said that he was shocked. Okay? And there are many others. Victor Smith was making up, of course, Mr. Arthur was there before Victor Smith. Now, I have to be honest. But is that visibility? When it comes to elections, visibility is important. It's not competence we are talking about here. His competence, I think, is beyond doubt. As an economist, as somebody who's done financial engineering, quote unquote, and all the rest, it is undisputable. And I'm not sure there's anybody out there who will question Mr. Arthur's professional competence. You can debate him on choices that were made, policy choices, and the effects of those policy choices from PNDC to today. That's legitimate. We can debate that. But that you can isolate from the man's professionalism, his competence as an economist. I'm not sure that is what anybody is going to do out there. No. So the ticket, the Mahama Emisa Atta ticket, compared to the Mills Mahama ticket in terms of relativity and comparative analysis, is weaker. There's no doubt.
But don't you think he may be a gem out to be discovered? We
No,
don't know.
I haven't said that. I haven't said this is a bad. I haven't said that at all.
He's talking about the weight of the political
no,
ticket.
please. I'm doing within the context. Within the
ticket.
context of the time constraint. This is a challenge. This is an extraordinary period. We all know that. The NDC were banking on Mills Mahama. They knew that was a trump card, a big ticket for them, and they had packaged this ticket. Nobody expected the demise of our president at this time it happened. And we all know the challenges the party is facing. And they are confronted by picking a vice president who should merge into a running mate. That's the political reality. They won't admit it because of constitutional matters. They have to be law-abiding. They have to talk constitution. Okay? But strictly speaking, I'll be amazed if President Mahama was picking a Misata as his vice without an eye on him being his running mate. I'll be surprised.
And if he becomes his running mate, you think that's a weaker ticket?
I've said relatively and comparatively, yes. Especially within the time constraint, the 4 or 5 months to sell. Look, NDC, your station played some voices. They are foot soldiers. They are rank and file. Very young generation. Many of them say, we don't know him. That doesn't mean that Ma is not a loyalist of the NDC. Indeed, he was a Mills loyalist. Dedicated to the former president, his close friend. I know that. All those things are facts. Okay? And I believe that is why some of the old guys were pushing Kwesi Botwe as the one to partner President Mills first as vice president. And I say logically, whoever in this context, because of the time constraint, anybody, whoever the president picked, he would have had an eye that I'm going with him into the election. Otherwise, it's politically suicidal. Okay? So, the Kwesi Botwe thing was such that, it's like a political godfather and advisedly, and some political kid on the blocks. The age element is so big, political chemistry may not gel. So the president, I'm sure, made the right choice when it came to these 2 names, which were on the top, Kwesi Botwe versus Misata. The right choice was made. But the right choice does not mean that the ticket is as competitive as the Mills Mahama ticket.
Elom Komlaga from Adenta says an injunction should be put on the funeral until an autopsy is performed on the body to ascertain the cause of death of our president. Well, we don't have any formal communication on whether or not an autopsy has been performed. JC Buakumban Probi says, what killed our president is not an issue. We should not make politics out of this. He was a man of peace and humility. We should just let him rest in peace. This one doesn't bear them. He says, if this election is about age, then we all might as well vote for Hassan Ayarga of the PNC, simply on the basis that he's the youngest of the presidential candidates at present. Another one without the name says, the issue of the social status of our Vice President-elect should not be kept under the blanket as a private matter. David from Ofanko says, Mr. Emisa and Dr. Dufour cooked figures and presented to the World Bank, and Ghana was charged $30 million. He should respond to these. Yeah, from Tema says, how can Honorable Idwasari blame the press for the mess by the government concerning the funeral arrangement? He should just admit that they fumbled, and we move on. It goes on to say, from the look of things, the funeral committee will not give us value for money. I smell another Gambian funeral on the way. Ghanaians deserve better. Rex from Bawe says, a case for the coroner becomes mandatory by law when a person, anybody, dies in the house or dies less than 24 hours after being admitted to a hospital. We are talking about our president, who died less than an hour after making it to 37. He could even... so you are going on to say that a coroner's report is required in this case. Let's go for a little break. When we return...
I'm not sure if a Misata was in office when that incident occurred, that misreporting. Because I don't think he was in the government NDC2 administration. I'm not sure about that.
He wasn't.
He wasn't, yeah.
In fairness to him.
Yeah.
He wasn't in office at the time. This is the final lap of the show this Saturday morning. And Sani says, talking of ages, the Honorable Idwasa are implying that if the late president was to be alive, he would have been substituted for a younger candidate now. As we are aware, the late president is of the same age as Nanado. I think it's competence and experience and not age. Emmanuel from Agona says, if the president really believes in age, why did he nominate a senior brother as vice and not someone younger. Elvis from WA says, not all national executives agreed on the choice of Baumia, but majority of members of the MPP have now accepted him. Augustine from Cape Coast says Nana Kumia should be informed that when Mr. Arthur became governor in September, the dollar was 1.43 cedis. King Nama says the president is gone. Why spend time on an autopsy report? What do we gain from that? Let me remind you that if you could speak with all your friends from your old school and from elsewhere on one phone call, or if you could meet with all the national delegates of your political party or all the branch pastors of your large church or your business associates all at once on phone, wouldn't it be exciting? You can do everything an actual meeting would permit. Even better, you can save a lot on travel time and money. Connect with up to 1,000 people wherever they are all at once. It's another first from MTN. So go on, share documents live, record playback meetings, and so much more with MTN Audio Conference Service. Register for free at audioconference.mtn.com.gh. That's audioconference.mtn.com.gh. MTN Audio Conference, many voices, one meeting, one call. MTN, it's everywhere you go. More of your thoughts coming through this morning. Jay from Hong Kong says, I think Haruna Idrisu should be blamed for the controversy that's erupted concerning the burial of the president. I wonder why the NDC as a government cannot get anything right. We all know that the late president refused to use the Flagstaff House while he was alive. Why even think of laying him to rest there? Aite says, unnecessary haste to do propaganda with every issue is the cause of the many gaffes of this government. They did extreme propaganda on behalf of the prof when he was alive, so they wanted to continue after he had passed on. He got it very wrong and nearly messed up the funeral of the late prof. They should give the late prof some respect after his exit from the lingering NDC confusion. And I have a comment from Pama in Tongo who says, what is Mr. Idwasari talking about? When Nanado said all die be die, learned people interpreted it as planning to kill people. When it is Nanado, they say it has bad intent. When it's John Mahama, then he says it's just a sense of humor. 1422 across networks. The world will hear you if you send your thoughts to us. You can also put them on facebook.com/joy997. Mr. Rasari, Mark Namidu sent an application to the Supreme Court during the week just gone by, and he's asking for 9 declarations, one instructive one being that the entire contract with Isofoton was indeed not a contract properly so recognized according to the State Contracts Act, and therefore all the following incidents should be thrown out. In that process, some have suggested he's subtly reminding us that the whole subject of judgment debts and the brouhaha it came with and how it should or shouldn't have been dealt with is still lingering, and at some point we've got to deal with it. Have we lost track of that subject?
I'm not sure, but I think Ghanaians believe in the right timing of issues. And I think, again, Mr. Martin Amidu is, just making himself unpopular this time round. Because for me, I think the mood of the people of Ghana today is about how to lay our president to rest. Then we'll come back to other issues. It's not as if someone wants to push these matters under any wraps or carpet or whatsoever.
But NDC is capable.
But for now, we want to concentrate on giving our late president a befitting burial. If he is not sensitive to such an issue, I think a lot of Ghanaians are. And I also know pretty soon the judiciary will be going on break. So by the time they return, if there are issues to be sorted out at the Supreme Court, I'm sure the government will prepare and do what is right and what is proper. But for now, I think he's gotten it all wrong. He doesn't seem to fit into whatever is going on. He's behaving like a foreigner, and I'm not sure even foreigners will want to behave this way when they know the leader of the country they live in preparation is being made towards his burial, and then you want to rope in such issues. For me, I think he's lost it. Trust me.
Susan earlier mentioned that, in spite of sentiments and other things, there are bread and butter issues. Isn't this, a major governance issue that, in spite of the sentiments of the moment, are still must be watched, even if it's from the corner of our eye?
I'm not sure any government agency, okay, has stopped work. They are all working. But I'm saying that these are issues that will draw controversies, will sidestep the mood that we need to put our late president to rest. And for me, the timing, good timing, is important. I'm not saying it is not legitimate to raise the issues he's talking about. It is. But the timing, if you do it at the wrong time, you've lost it. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Nana, I'll come to you shortly. Let me just read a few comments. Joseph says, age comes with wisdom and experience. See how the president begins to fumble with the job he accepted from Ghana. Victor Smith will be sacked. Edwasari suffered the same fate when he made the same remarks with regards to STX Korea. Raymond from Cape Coast says, Mr. Arthur should be scrutinized thoroughly before he assumes this enviable position. Schiffman from Atonsu says, in fact, I think Mr. Arthur has nothing new to stop this incompetent government from going into opposition. This one doesn't bear a name. Says, we thank God the secret is now out of the bag. The passage of no confidence in the failed NDC3 government by Victor Smith must be a wake-up call to all Ghanaians. And Pama from Talensi says, health was not supposed to be a factor, but now age will be a factor. Granted, but Mr. Edwasari, you should know that Woyome will still be a factor in 2012. Nana, let me hear you.
Thank you, Kojo. Just a quick thing. Edwasari had mentioned that Zimbabwe's inflation was 1,000%. Apparently, in trying to do a reflection on Dr. Bawumia's tenure as a Africa Development Bank Special Envoy, Economic Advisor to Zimbabwe. As we speak, Zimbabwe's inflation is 4% as a result of the good work of Dr. Bawumia. You can check. It's 4% as we speak. Joy FM, no, you let Joy FM check.
No, I asked
now,
you have Google. Why didn't you?
You're talking about timing. Today, when we ask for Hamidu, the timing is important. But when John Mahama was campaigning, that one, it's a joke.
Campaigning where?
Timing is everything. If the man says that he wants to pursue justice at this time, let him do it. Fine. Let's look at the case on his merits. Now, Kojo, I'll just take 2 seconds to read to you a portion of the man's statement. Amidu says that essentially he's doing this. The announcement and threats issued to the public in July on the Newsfile program by Okudzeto Ablakwa that the government was about to pay the balance of the alleged isophoton judgment debt while the matter was still pending on appeal. It's a clear sign that the government is incapable of pursuing and protecting the public interest in this matter. The pronouncement of the Deputy Minister of Information has not been denied by the Attorney General. This is in spite of the fact that I challenged it. So basically, Mr. Amidu is saying that he doubts that the NDC government is willing to pursue the public interest in this matter of payment of judgment debt as far as isophoton is concerned. And I agree entirely with Mr. Amidu. If you look at the situation, the isophoton matter as a part of the general matter of judgment debt, it's so difficult to understand what this government is doing. It's so difficult. I believe that there's clear connivance and collusion going on. Otherwise, you cannot explain the situation. The Woyome matter is a classic, where we are told that President Mills himself, not once, but twice, ordered that payments should be stopped. Subsequently, the government went to court. And indeed, the courts of Ghana reaffirmed the president's position and also ruled that payments should be suspended. Yet still, the government found a way to make all the payments to Woyome. When the matter became a matter of public interest, they turned to us and said they have been defrauded. The government was sitting there, Sunday school teacher, and they have been defrauded by the wicked Mr. Woyome. So the courts of Ghana should go order the return of the money.
Are you telling the whole story all over again? We've heard these things over 1,000 times.
Please.
You are telling the same story.
There's a topic we are discussing, okay? You have discussed your bit. I'm discussing my bit.
I thought there's
Do you understand democracy?
Why are you going back to Woyome and all
I'm just painting a picture for you, so you stop the propaganda. Now, this situation, Kojo, how do you explain it? If the courts of Ghana say, don't go and pay the money, you go and pay. And then you go to the courts that, oh, I've been defrauded, so court, order the man to pay me back the money. How do you understand it? Take isophoton. As of November 2008, the government of Ghana was in court with isophoton. 2009, the new government of the NDC goes to court to withdraw the case from court. They said to the court that they wanted to settle, to negotiate with isophoton. No problem. But what do? They then go and appoint a company called the Professional Group to do an audit of the issue of isophoton. What it means is that there's so many documents. Isophoton is presenting documents. The Attorney General is presenting documents. So you appoint a company to do an audit to see the way forward for the government. They paid that company almost $300,000.
And the charge is that, as legitimate as questions may be, the mood of the moment, suggests that maybe Mr. Amido or anybody who seeks to discuss these matters should pause. Let's finish with these things before we come to it.
So you want us to pause?
No, I'm asking you. Okay. What do you think?
Well, I would. The man has gone to court. I suspect by the time the matter will come to court, the funeral of President Mills would have been over. So you appoint a company, pay them What's your problem? Why are you doing this all? Why did you sleep last night? You go and pay the people $300,000 of taxpayers' money to do a desk audit for you, so they can advise you on the way forward on the isophoton. Before the company could finish its work, you go and sit down with isophoton and do an agreement with them to pay them some money, and you actually start paying them the money. Then the company that you've appointed to do the investigation for you, they come with their report and they say to you that isophoton has no case against you, so go and contest. Then you say that, well, we've already gone and negotiated with isophoton and we started paying. So really, even though you've brought us this report, we can't do anything about it. How can anybody explain this conduct? How? You spend our money to appoint a company to investigate. Before the investigation could finish, you go and pay the money. Then the investigation comes, you said, I can't do anything because I've paid the money already. This is why Hamidu says this matter cannot be allowed to rest. His conscience will not allow him to rest. So he's going to
read. You don't file him for that. Susan, do you fear that by the time we are done with this funeral, we are done with the politics of the moment, an important subject like this, and perhaps a certain lasting resolution to that whole canker that we started talking about a few months ago would have slipped under the carpet? Or you have confidence that we will be able to?
No, I don't think it will slip under the carpet at all, not at all. But a little aside, when we were young, there was the story of the Agama lizard. There was one guy who, was going for an exam and learned about the Agama lizard. And then he goes there and the Agama lizard didn't come. It was a bird. So he says, the bird climbs a tree, falls down and dies and falls next to a Agama lizard. And Agama lizard is this. Nana is doing a lot of that. A lot of it. You ask him some question and he wants to talk about the Agama lizard. So he goes there, you ask him about a bird and he's talking about the Agama lizard.
I don't understand. I was talking about judgment beds.
No, before that, he was doing a lot of it.
Is Agama? Come back from your side.
Yeah, from our side. I think that the issue will not go away. It definitely will not go away. It will come back. And
it doesn't like
maybe, the NDC has only been given breathing space, now. But I think that
we want to read Mati Hamidu's tribute first.
We don't have much time.
No,
we don't have much time.
The issue is, and I agree with Nana. I mean, a company has done an audit and has come out to say that you should not pay any monies to this company, and you have a case. There was no contract. I think Ministry of Food and Agri were not the ones supposed to do the contract, but the Ministry of Finance and etc. So with that, you cannot say, you should not throw good money after bad money. If you had already paid for something and somebody says, oh, that thing that you paid for was worthless, you don't say, oh, okay, since I've already started paying for it, and let me continue to pay for it. And no, that's not the attitude to take. And I think that we must question our government officials on that. I think this whole isophoton issue should be looked at carefully. The whole judgment debt issue should be looked at. I mean, why are we paying these judgment debts? Are there ways and means of going about it? Judgment debts will come about, definitely. But are there loopholes that people are exploiting to fleece, the taxpayer? So, on the whole, it will be a political issue after the burial of the president, and we think that NDC is just being given a little breathing space, But we will come back to the issue, and we will take the issues as Martin Emidu has said that he is as a public citizen, it's in his right.
We are expecting his tribute, I said.
Well, as for his tribute, maybe it will come. Yes, we can talk about timing, and that the timing seems a little, out of place. But then, hey, this is what
These are the bread and butter issues you were talking about?
Yes, definitely, and it will come up. But what the NDC have to realize is that they say what a blow inevitably yours,
From future calamity. Quick, let me give you the final say on this one.
When were we in court?
You mean you and I in court?
Yes.
This was on Tuesday morning.
We were in court?
Yes, on Tuesday morning.
And that was for contempt of court on the Wayome case.
Yes.
David Annan.
Yeah.
He's the one who is...
he's the applicant in that case, and you and I have been cited as co-contempt.
He's a member of the NDC legal team.
Yeah.
He's a member of the NDC. And we are all mourning the president, aren't we?
Yeah.
But he had dragged us to court.
Right.
We were in court.
He doesn't choose the date for...
The court, exactement. I was about to say the courts have not closed down. They are not mourning in the sense of not working. The CJ and some judges visited the president to express their condolences. They didn't declare that the courts had closed down and that we are waiting the burial before they work. And so David Annan had every business taking us there on that day. The courts are working. That's the point I'm making. The issues related to the president's burial and things, there are certain issues we have said it's better dealt with after the burial. We haven't said all other issues. The courts are working. When we got there, all the courts were open. People are going in and out. Yes, so, and let's be fair to Martin. In this last paragraph, he says, I have had to delay making this statement until now to honor the memory of my late personal friend of several years and president of this dear republic, whose untimely death we all mourn. May he rest in peace. So he exercised a certain period
for the burial.
No. I don't think it was fair. He did what he thought he should do. He suspended this action for a while. After all, yes, he did. That's what he's saying here. That's what he's saying here. And in terms of court processes, I don't see how that conflicts with the burial. I don't see. If he was raising issues about the president's health and death and raising issues and going to court on it, I would say, hold on, you're wrong. But this is an entirely distinct issue. Judgment debts, isophoton. And a minister of state had told us on this table that government was negotiating to pay the outstanding balance. He, as Attorney General, had filed a case against it. And the case had been dismissed, but appeal was pending. So now he's going under the public interest in Article 2 and 130. That's a patriotic citizen of the land. He may or may not win, and as he himself has indicated here. But if he, as Attorney General, had challenged the thing, the High Court had proceeded to dismiss it, there was an appeal pending, and he's sitting here somewhere, quote unquote, and he finds out that the government that he belonged to is now negotiating to pay. And he has an option, which is the constitutional option. Go under Article 2 and 130 of the Constitution and at least hold it in abeyance till the court has determined whether indeed what the government is doing is right or wrong. You don't take on such a gentleman. You may disagree with him on so many issues and you may criticize him, but on this specific case and the timing of his case, initiating an action, he's above board. There's nothing you can do about it. This does not conflict with the president, anything to do with the president's burial. It does not undermine the spirit of the moment. Otherwise, the CD should order the courts to stop all litigations.
Oh, Kweku, that was not my point.
No, I'm not saying your point. Please, I'm not saying this in direct reference to whatever you've said, but I'm making a case that out there, the courts are running and are running cases. What do you mean? Safamafo just took a day off, didn't he? That he was mourning President Mills, his friend. But didn't he appear in court the following day? Didn't he?
He did.
Yes, the way you make case is ongoing. Safamafo only mourned a day. The following day, he had to go to court. If he hadn't gone, I'm sure they would have gone dragging him there. So please, the case, the judgment death case are ongoing. It has nothing to do with the president's death or burial arrangements. Nothing to do with it.
Kweku Baku Jr., for you. Let me read some final comments as we wrap up our show. In view of the brouhaha surrounding the choice of burial place for the departed president, wouldn't it be prudent to ask the two surviving former presidents to tell us where they will want to be buried before we have another drama surrounding their burial? Abubakar from Kumasi says, thank God people are underrating the vice presidential nominee. Remember, this is exactly what they did to Mills. Kwame says, funerals are expensive, but let's avoid gargantuan expenditures which could generate into judgment debts. I'm serious about frivolous expenditures. Let me go on to Twitter. H. Donko says, did I hear Nana Kumia say Zimbabwe's inflation is 4%? I think it's 17%. So Mr. Duasari says 1,000%. Nana Kumia says 4%. We're checking. Hopefully next week on Newsfile I'll tell you what the exact number is.
Because it was
Abdul Haq 5 says President Mahama needs to enforce his authority. He has to sack or reshuffle Victor Smith. Yao Mante on Twitter says the competence of an individual lies in what he has to show for his stewardship. I don't see that in Emisata. Well, we'll find out on Monday when he goes before Parliament and perhaps in the 5 months that he will be serving as Vice President. Here are my thoughts as we wrap up. On the very first subject of burial of the President, let's give the old man a befitting burial, devoid of gaffes and unnecessary posturing. He deserves it. And on questions about the disclosure, well, they are fair questions, but as we are learning, they may have to wait until later. On Mr. Arthur, let the Appointments Committee do its constitutionally mandated duty sensitive of the dignities required for the office of Vice President. And on judgment debts, the challenge still confronts us. When we are done with our mourning, we'll have to deal with that subject.